You open your eyes for the first time, not in a cozy burrow or a grassy field, but inside a sterile cage with the welcoming aroma of disinfectant and anxiety. Congratulations! You're a lab mouse born with one purpose: to make human lives slightly less inconvenient. Your first few weeks are comfortable enough. Food arrives regularly, water drips conveniently from above, and the bedding is changed daily. It almost seems nice until you notice that the humans staring at you from behind their clipboards look way too interested in your existence. By week 3, you've grown just enough to catch their attention. A gloved hand reaches in, grabbing you by your tail. A grip not exactly designed for comfort. You're weighed, measured, and prodded in places you'd rather keep private. But this humiliation is only the appetizer for what's about to come. One morning, you're transferred to a new cage labeled Control Group. Sounds harmless, right? Wrong. You're about to learn that in this world, even doing absolutely nothing can be a disaster. Meanwhile, your siblings are injected with substances you can't even pronounce. Suddenly, your bland pellets don't seem so bad. Days blur into routine. Your existence marked by boredom, punctuated by fear. Occasionally, someone forgets to refill your water bottle. Oops, human error. And let's not mention your roommate, who's developed a nasty habit of nibbling on your tail out of sheer boredom. So much for teamwork. Weeks later, you're reassigned. This time you're no longer a passive observer. You're officially part of an experiment testing something called memory enhancement drugs. Ironically, you'd rather forget what's coming next. They place you in a maze every single day, expecting you to remember the path to cheese that's less a reward and more an insult. No pressure, but every failed attempt results in another dosage. Your heart races constantly, not from excitement, but from pure pharmaceutical terror. Months roll by, and you've aced the maze. No thanks to the drugs, mostly just desperation. Your reward? More experiments. You're now the star participant in a stress response study. Translation: it's time to meet your new best friend, electric shock floor. Just the right amount of voltage to remind you that relaxation isn't on today's menu, or tomorrow's. Next, you're enrolled in an immune response trial, where you're exposed to various pathogens to see how your tiny body copes. Sneezing, fever, and constant discomfort become your new normal. If that wasn't enough, you soon find yourself in a sleep deprivation experiment. Bright lights, loud noises, and constant prodding ensure rest is merely a distant memory. Your fur begins to thin, and your whiskers droop from constant stress. Friends? Who needs them when you have electrodes and a compromised immune system? Speaking of friends, that mouse in the adjacent cage stopped moving 2 days ago. You'd mourn him, but frankly, survival is consuming enough of your energy. Now it's time for the pain tolerance study, where your threshold for discomfort is tested with tiny injections, sharp pinches, and small incisions, all carefully documented by the ever-attentive researchers. Following that ordeal, you're placed in a dietary restriction experiment, where your meals become smaller, less frequent, and far less satisfying. You quickly learn what true hunger feels like. Occasionally, through your cage bars, you witness experiments on other animals. Rats next door endure maze runs far more elaborate and taxing, along with harsher shocks and invasive surgeries. You notice their panic and desperation vividly, eyes wide with terror as researchers calmly jot notes. Across the aisle, rabbits are immobilized, undergoing eye irritation tests that make your fur stand on end. Their quiet whimpers barely audible, but heartbreakingly clear. In another room, you glimpse dogs subjected to repeated injections and invasive procedures, their howls echoing hauntingly through the sterile corridors. Monkeys with sorrowful eyes stare blankly through cage bars, enduring psychological and neurological experiments designed to test their breaking points. Witnessing their suffering amplifies your dread, knowing your torment is just a small piece of a much larger, unsettling puzzle. Sometimes you overhear human conversations filled with complex justifications, words like necessary research, scientific advancement, and greater good. Their tone ranges from clinical detachment to mild unease, but you sense the moral weight lingering in the air. Their rationalizations do little to ease your anxiety or pain. Occasionally, you catch snippets of debate among the researchers. Some express doubts, questioning the morality of causing intentional distress, asking, "Isn't there another way?" Others argue it's a necessary evil for breakthroughs, pointing to past discoveries made possible only through animal suffering. You overhear one of the younger humans excitedly discussing new simulated computer models that could potentially replace live animals in certain studies. Unfortunately, the older, seasoned scientists brush off the idea as impractical, claiming real-world biology can't yet be fully simulated. You sigh, wishing they'd hurry up with technological advancements, or better yet, test them on themselves first. The researchers seem thrilled with your progress. You're featured prominently in their data, though your personal life expectancy doesn't seem to factor into their equation. At 9 months old, you feel elderly. Life expectancy in the wild might reach 2 years, but here, let's just say retirement isn't part of your benefits package. Suddenly, the lab goes quiet. Maybe it's the weekend. Humans have something called days off. No such luck for you. You notice fewer visitors lately, fewer cleanings, and occasionally fewer feedings. Budget cuts? Someone murmurs. You're now sharing your cage with 3 others who seem to have lost the will to live. Just when you think you've seen it all, you're introduced to a behavioral study examining how isolation affects mental health. You're moved to a solitary cage away from all companions. Silence and boredom push you into repetitive behaviors, pacing endlessly, grooming excessively, even chewing your own fur, desperate for stimulation. In another room, you notice humans observing a fellow mouse fitted with a tiny sensor-rigged vest inside a brightly lit cage. Suddenly, a robotic predator, a lifelike snake, appears. The mouse freezes in panic, heart visibly pounding through the vest before desperately seeking escape. Humans document this predator stress experiment daily, charting psychological breakdowns. Watching this horror, you realize you're part of experiments designed to push boundaries at your expense. One final experiment awaits, involving a strangely glowing substance. You're briefly famous in a paper titled something like "Mouse Reactions to Radioactive Compounds." Spoiler alert, reactions aren't exactly positive. You lose your appetite, your strength wanes, and even your fellow lab mice start keeping their distance. You're now just over a year old, ancient by lab mouse standards. Your fur has patches missing, your eyes cloudy, your movements sluggish. The scientists scribble their final notes, their interest waning as quickly as your health. You see other animals being carted away, rats, rabbits, even monkeys, removed quietly, never to return. Your cage is moved to the back corner, labeled clearly as completed study. Days fade into darkness, each breath harder than the last. You survived countless trials, endless experiments, and a maze so repetitive it's burned into your fading memory. Yet, in the end, you're discarded quietly. Your contribution reduced to data points on a graph most will never read. Turns out, life as a lab mouse isn't about living. It's about enduring. You close your tired eyes one final time, relieved that your days as a tiny, unwilling hero of science are finally over. Life as a lab mouse might suck, but trust me, there's another creature out there that has it even worse. Curious who? Check out the next video and see for yourself.